The divine witness. What if the gods never left? What if even now they are watching, not with judgment, not with anger, but with sorrow? Not because they were forgotten, but because they remember what we do not. In every death, they were there. In every collapse of breath, every final whisper, every mother's scream, every soldier's last cry, the divine saw and remembered. We think of gods as conquerors, as kings, warriors, stormbringers. But before they ruled, they watched. And perhaps their power was not in what they could destroy, but in what they could endure. Tonight, we remember the watchers, the gods who did not intervene, but who never looked away. Chapter 1, the first death. In every mythology, there is a first death. In Sumer, it was Tammuz. In Egypt, Osiris. In Greece, Adonis. Young gods, lovers of life. Cut down. Not because they were weak, but because the world demanded memory. The gods died first, so that we might not die alone. They went into the underworld not to conquer it, but to make it bearable. To plant flowers in the dust. To carve songs into the walls. And ever since, death has not been empty. It is lined with footprints, divine ones, who went before us, so that when our time comes, we walk a path already blessed by grief. Chapter 2, the gods who were powerless. We like our gods mighty, able to save, to punish, to protect. But what if divinity is not control? What if it is witnessing? In the Iliad, Zeus weeps when his son must die. He sees it, he knows it, but he does not stop it. Even I cannot save him, he says, and so he watches. That is the hardest form of love, not to act, but to be present, to feel every wound, to hear every cry, and to carry it without flinching. The gods, perhaps, were never rulers. They were keepers of memory, and their temples were not thrones. They were places to remember the dead. Chapter 3, the sky as archive. The stars remember. They watched when cities burned, when lovers whispered goodbye, when kings fell to dust and peasants vanished unnamed. They saw it all and said nothing, but in their silence they did not forget. In Egypt, the goddess Nut arches over the world, her body the night sky. She swallows the sun each dusk and births it anew each dawn. In doing so, she carries the souls of the dead through the night. She does not speak, but she holds. The sky in many traditions is not a place of glory. It is a library of loss. And when you look up, you are not looking at infinity. You are looking at witness. Chapter 4, Rituals of Remembrance. Why we offer to the dead. The ancients left food on graves, lit candles, spoke names aloud year after year. Why? Because they believed the dead did not vanish. They lingered, waiting to be remembered. The gods, too, were not distant. They were among the dead. In many myths, offerings were not bribes. They were reminders. We remember you. You mattered. You died, and we watched, and we will not forget. The divine does not need gifts, but perhaps it needs recognition. And we need a place to bring our grief, not to be healed, but to be heard. Chapter 5, the deaths that were not seen. Not every death is witnessed. Some fade in silence. No funeral, no mourning, no name. And yet, the ancients believed no death is truly unseen. That somewhere, someone watches. A forgotten god, a silent presence, a being who holds the names no one else remembers. In Babylon, there were gods of thresholds. In Africa, spirits of crossroads. In forgotten temples, there were statues built to weep not for kings, but for the ones no one knew had died. The woman alone in childbirth. The outcast buried without a name. The child lost before it spoke. These, the myths say, are the ones closest to the divine, because the gods who watch us die know that the smallest life is never less sacred. Chapter 6, when we die in pieces. Not all deaths come at the end. Some come in moments, a betrayal, a goodbye, a silence too heavy to bear. And every time, something in us dies. The ancients didn't only mourn the body, they mourned the shattering of the soul. In shamanic traditions, pieces of the soul were believed to fracture under trauma, and rituals were created to call them back, not to make the person whole again, but to remind them that the gods had never left, that even as we die, one breath at a time, we are still being watched, not as a warning, but as a promise. No part of you dies alone. Chapter 7, the judgment that was never about punishment. We imagine judgment as scales, as thrones, as fire. But for the ancients, judgment was often remembrance. In the Egyptian Book of the Dead, the heart is weighed against a feather, not to condemn, but to see if it carried too much. Was it heavy with what was not spoken? Burdened with what was not forgiven? Judgment, perhaps, was not the gods deciding if you were worthy, but you deciding if you were true. And the gods? They were not judges. They were witnesses, holding the silence as you spoke aloud the life you lived. Every pain, every beauty, every moment you thought no one saw, they saw. What if you're not alone? Not in your grief, not in your final breath, not in your silent nights. What if somewhere, behind the stars, beneath the earth, a memory waits? Not your memory, the memory of the divine, of who you were, of who you almost became, of the beauty you gave even when no one noticed. And what if, when you die, the gods do not greet you with questions, but with one simple sentence, we remember? Would that be enough? Would it change the way you live? To know that every death was watched and held and kept. In the book of What Was Holy, Closing Reflection, the Divine Archive. If this story found you, it's because some part of you remembers. That silence is not emptiness, that death is not absence, that the divine is not power, but presence, and that long after the body is dust, your life, your sorrow, your breath, your falling, is written somewhere, remembered, not because you were famous, but because you were real, because you felt, because you tried. And the gods, those quiet watchers of every death, will never forget.